What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. Chris Pennell here, breaking down my final thoughts for week 5 of the NFL season for DraftKings and FanDuel. We'll be going position by position, talking cash games, and looking at stacks for tournaments. We'll build a lot as we progress through this, more so for a single entry tournament build. We'll go over my process of why I make the decisions I will be making. Because if you want to end up becoming a better DFS player, which is the goal here, you need to understand the process and reasoning of why you're doing things, instead of just being spoon-fed plays. And then at the end, I'm an optimizer at the end to see who's populating the most as of right now. And for those returning, you already know, but if you're brand new here, this is not the home of hot takes or any biased kind of decisions. We look at the data and we interpret it for what makes the most sense for DFS purposes on a week-to-week basis. It is your friend. Take advantage of that. If that sounds good to you, do me a favor, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for brand new. Let's dive right into it. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position. And I gotta be honest, really large quarterback pool for me this week. There's just several spots on this slate that I think make sense. And I wouldn't say there's one complete standout quarterback for me this week. And even if we are talking cash games, I don't think there's even just one or two guys that stand out above the rest. Normally, I would say stick to the guys that have legs and you get the nice high floor. So that would be Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels. Although this weekend, I don't really like Josh Allen in cash games. I think you can make a nice case for Lamar Jackson if you do have the money for him. But once again, Jaden Daniels just continues to be too cheap. He's below 7K. I am not sure why. It looks like from what we've seen so far, the first month in the NFL season, which I realize can be a pretty small sample size. But Jaden Daniels is going to run the football, and he's going to do it quite often. He's averaging 11.5 rushing attempts per game this year, 1 rushing touchdown. And he's been pretty good through the air too, completing over 80% of his passes. I know this is a tougher matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, but when you have that rushing upside like he has on a weekly basis, there is no reason he should be below 7K. I don't know if it's because of the matchup. That's why they priced him down, but there's no reason he shouldn't be like right behind Lamar Jackson. So a nice value on DraftKings. I would say currently he's probably my favorite cash game quarterback, but that's not saying he is like leaps and bounds ahead of the other guys. But on FanDuel, nearly $9,000. That's pretty tough. Like on FanDuel, he is $100 cheaper than Lamar Jackson. That's what he should be on DraftKings, but that's not the case. So you play him on DraftKings, tougher to get to on FanDuel. And now I normally say you play the guys with legs, like I mentioned. But this is one of those weeks where I don't think you exactly have to do that. I think quarterbacks like Brock Purdy, Geno Smith are a bit too cheap this week. Really good spots, especially Brock Purdy. They're going to have some ownership, and I do think they are playable in cash games. Just to take a look here at how I have these specific quarterbacks projected out. And I do these for all positions. I have my entire NFL model, simulate the slates out, go over stacks and whatnot. It's all on the sheet here. So if you guys do want access to that, you can always get a link down below the description or the pinned comment. It's just nice to see how like fantasy projections actually stat out and the reasons why guys are getting projected how they are. So if we take a look over here, which I don't think you guys can see the ownership, but ownership for right now, it's Friday, so don't think any of these numbers are final, but I currently have a lot of the cheap quarterbacks being the highest owned. Brock Purdy, Geno Smith at the top, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, like right there. Like I think these are currently the 4 best cash game quarterbacks currently. Ownership could end up changing, but right now that is what I like. But there are certainly some decent value options. Like Deshaun Watson leads the way for me this week. I couldn't trust him in cash games, but when we talk stacks, I will mention it. But Jaden Daniels, second right there, Geno Smith, Brock Purdy, all looking like some pretty decent value plays at the position. And if we do go cheap at quarterback this week, we can spend up at the running back and wide receiver positions, which we do have some really solid options this weekend. So I don't think it's a poor way to go. And then taking a look at the stack sheet here, because if we're talking tournament quarterbacks, usually we're stacking with them. Now these complete mobile guys like Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, don't exactly have to, but it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world to at least get one stacking option with them. Now, if we have these statues under center like Joe Burrow, I would generally like to try to get 2 pass catchers, especially if they have like at least 2 really good pass catchers, which he does. With Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Yoshi Voss has been solid this year. Tight end position, I mean, who knows? I think a lot of us, like Mike Gesicki last week, ended up, doing nothing, like 0.7, like 1 catch for negative 7 yards. Eric All was involved a little bit, but you know, it is what it is. But either way, San Francisco, it tops the board for me, which makes sense. This is the highest over-under game of the week. 28.8 implied team total for the 49ers, which is also the highest of the week by at least a couple of points here. Now, they're not the overall best projected stack. That is Seattle. But if we're looking at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, assuming George Kittle is in, which my projections have him in currently, I am recording this before the 49ers practice takes place. So if he happens to be out, that will take a slight dip. But I mean, absolutely loaded offense. I realize they're one of the more expensive teams overall, and the most expensive team we are talking about here. They're still below 6K, and this is not a hard team to fit in. Like Brock Purdy's only $6,200. He projects very well at his price point. Jordan Mason's still below $7,500. And then all the pass catchers outside of that are below 7K. Deebo Samuel, $6,800. So very easy to stack this team up. Love the 49ers in general this week. For Seattle, Geno Smith, once again, one of the best projected teams. They have Kenneth Walker, who I like quite a bit as well. But if you are not playing the run game for these guys, the passing attack looks great with Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, JSN, even Tyler Lockett if you want. Obviously, Noah Fant's not going to project the best if you're looking at the quarterback tight end projections, but there's other ways to go besides Noah Fant. For Houston, tons of great options here. Joe Mixon's going to be out once again. Now, they did get Tank Dell back, which does muddy the waters. Last week was nice because we knew the ball every time CJ Stroud dropped back was pretty much going to either Nico Collins or Stephon Diggs. Both guys had great games, but always Houston, when they're all three healthy, you're going to be like pretty much the best quarterback wide receiver stack of the entire week, at least raw points wise. Baltimore, looking at the stack scores here, it looks pretty gross. Tight end's always going to project decent because they have two solid ones. And Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, although Mark Andrews seems to be complete dust this year, so I obviously would not have interest for DFS this week in him. And really, if I am playing Baltimore, I'm basically just playing Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry. I wouldn't play them together personally. If you do want to stack with Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers would be my favorite option. I currently have him projected for 13.5 points. It's not that great at $64. I think there's certainly better options, but the Cincy defense is definitely beatable. Cincy, we already went over. Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence is a decent cheap quarterback this week. Really soft matchup versus Indianapolis Colts. Now, raw points-wise, they're not going to project that great, but they're a pretty cheap team overall, especially over on FanDuel. And like I said, it doesn't feel great, but Lawrence with Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, very cheap stack. We will see who the quarterback is for the Indianapolis Colts. Prefer it to be Joe Flacco because I think he just kind of bumps that game up a bit overall. It would help the passing attack for the Indianapolis Colts. They're also not going to have Jonathan Taylor, so I would not mind that game just being back and forth. I know it's kind of an ugly game, Jacksonville and Indy, but there is the potential for a good amount of points to be scored in that one. I love the Green Bay stack this week. Average DK salary is dirt cheap at $5,100 for how they project out. Like one of the better overall quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end projections across the board. And then overall, I mean, at their price points, they look fantastic this week. So Jordan Love stacks with Jaden Reed, Tatavian Wicks, I even like Josh Jacobs. I mean, I wouldn't use Josh Jacobs in a quarterback stack with him, but overall, I love the offense there. Good spot versus the Los Angeles Rams. And if you are playing the Rams as bringbacks, it's either Kyron Williams or Jordan Whittington for me. I don't really have interest in anything else. Maybe a Kobe Parkinson. As far as Buffalo is concerned, like I don't mind Josh Allen, but overall, I'm going to have a harder time getting to that stack. Now, it's going to be much lower owned. I'm projecting Josh Allen to be around 5% owned. Meanwhile, guys in his price range like Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, they should be double the ownership. We do have Khalil Shakur being out, which does hurt Josh Allen a little bit, but I think Josh Allen has proved it does not matter who his wide receivers are. He can have good games no matter what. So it is a bump for guys like Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, Mac Hollins. That game does feature a pretty good 47.5 point over-under. And as for Cleveland, I'm a Cleveland fan, but dirty projections overall. Deshaun Watson is cheap. He's my best value quarterback of the week, at least point per dollar wise. That does not mean we have to force him into our lineups, but we know this is a very soft spot versus Washington. And you can do a very, very cheap stack of Deshaun Watson, Jerry Jeudy, or Amari Cooper if you want. We will see what the health status is of David Njoku. You can run it back if you want with a guy like Terry McLaurin or Zach Ertz. You don't exactly have to do that. But if you do go with the Cleveland stack, just know you can load up at running back and some other complementary wide receiver position players around them. All right, moving over to our lineup here. I just have to give a quick disclaimer. I know you're probably tired of hearing it, but you never know. People are new. Don't copy and paste this. That is not the reason we are here. I am showing you a process of how I would build a potential single entry type lineup. You can apply this same process, or at least a similar one. Just think about it when you're building to your own favorite plays and your own favorite game stacks if you want. And I'm just putting this on the fly really quick, and obviously there's still injury news that could come out that would change things anyway. So we need to grab a quarterback here. I think there's several pretty good cheap ones this week. Earlier in the week, we went with the 49ers ground game with Jordan Mason, and we did not play Brock Purdy, but I like Brock Purdy a lot this week. So we'll fire him in here at $6,200. And I have a good feeling we'll see Deebo Samuel and George Kittle later on in the near future. All right, moving on to the running back position. A bit of a big list this week, but there is some injuries making guys some pretty decent plays, and some news just dropped on a couple down at the bottom, like Alexander Madison and Tyrone Tracy, which are going to make them a viable place this week. But if we are spending up, let's go from like Kenneth Walker and up. All these guys are going to project very similar for me. If I had to pick my two favorites, it's going to be Jordan Mason and Kenneth Walker. I mean, Mason's in the absolute nut spot. He gets all the volume he can handle. He's in a great offense. They have the highest implied team total. Highest over of the week. He's playing at home. 7.5 point favorite. Great matchup versus the Cardinals, who've been terrible versus running backs this last season. I mean, I don't see any reason not to like Jordan Mason here. The price keeps creeping up. On FanDuel, it's kind of tough at $8,700, but on DraftKings, very easy to fit him in. And then Kyron Williams, Derrick Henry, all pretty similar to me. Like, I have Jordan Mason above them, and then I have Kenneth Walker above them, which Kenneth Walker is pretty cheap. He's $1,300 cheaper than Jordan Mason on FanDuel. $1,000 cheaper than Kyron on FanDuel and nearly $2,000 cheaper than Derrick Henry over there as well. So Walker is like screaming value over on the blue site on DraftKings. He's still cheaper than the rest, but not as cheaper. But definitely love those two quite a bit. Kyron, Derrick Henry, all viable plays. Like these guys get all the volume they can handle. Their threats around the goal line. Like there's no reason not to like them. It's just a matter of being able to afford them or not. But Mason and Walker are my two favorites. Also really like Josh Jacobs. If you are not playing the passing attack for Green Bay, I think they're going to be putting up some points here. This should be a high scoring game. And while Josh Jacobs is never really an exciting play, he should get you around 20 total touches, which on the season, he's averaging 21.1 opportunities per game. And Jordan Love does elevate this offense up a bit, at least in my opinion. I know Malik Willis had some good games, but I still think I would rather have him in than Malik Willis, at least. I'm sure most of you would agree. 3-point spread here on the road in LA. Like he's just a really nice volume play at a fair price point. Like on FanDuel, it's just so easy to fit in Jacobs and Kenneth Walker. You're probably getting around 40 opportunities from them. Good implied team totals. Like absolutely love that. Now, if we're looking to save some money with Chuba Hubbard on down, I wouldn't say there's much differentiating these guys from each other. Like I can't really sit here and say too much about Hubbard for DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift had a nice long touchdown last week, which he's been terrible this year, 3 yards per carry, but such a good matchup versus Carolina. They're allowing the second most points against running backs. I think that'll at least draw some ownership in. And Jerome Ford, not a ton of interest there, but I mean, he's going to get you roughly 15 opportunities. I would say Nick Chubb is not going to be back this week. Hubbard's got all the volume he can handle. Decent spot versus the Bears. Like I feel pretty good about Chuba, but the thing is, for $300 more, I feel better about Josh Jacobs personally. But the bottom 4 here are interesting because they're all just based off of injuries to the starting running backs. So we have Trey Sermon, Cam Akers, Alexander Mattison, and Tyrone Tracy. So if Sermon was priced like Tyrone Tracy, he would be the chalk of the week at the running back position, even though the coach did say this is going to be running back by committee. But I would say there's only 2 running backs, so they're going to get work down here anyway. So Trey Sermon should get the goal line work as well. Like I don't really have many concerns about that. The issue is that DraftKings did price him up with the anticipation that Jonathan Taylor could miss this week, so he's not really that much of a screaming value. Like for less than $1,000 more, I can get Josh Jacobs and Chuba Hubbard. Like it's not like that big of a deal. I don't think the ownership's going to be crazy. Cam Akers, awful. Last week we also saw Taylor get involved the week prior, so this is not as good of a play as I would have said like 2 weeks ago. But man, Buffalo got shredded on the ground by the Baltimore Ravens last week, and they are allowing the most points per game through running backs this year. Like Akers is playable, but man, he has burnt me because he's not been that great. Like I know he was fine the one game because he caught that receiving touchdown at the end, but other than that, he's been pretty bad, less than 4 yards per carry. Alexander Mattison with no Zamir White. Zamir White is terrible anyway, so I feel like this should have been a long time coming the past couple of weeks. But I do like Madison here. He has pass catching upside, over 3 targets per game this year, over 5 yards per carry. I know it's a small sample size because he's averaging 4 rushing attempts per game, but $5,200 as just a lone running back on that offense, I mean, I'll take it. And then Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary is listed as doubtful for this game, and if you are doubtful in the NFL, pretty much means you're going to be out. So with that being the case, we would assume Tyrone Tracy is going to lead this backfield in touches. He did outsnap Eric Gray last week. Not the best spot on the road in Seattle as a 7-point dog, but if you're going to get upwards of 10 plus touches at $4,300 to the running back position with potential goal line work, I mean, you're in the player pool for sure. All right, so moving back over to our build here. Got to get the running backs knocked out. Now, I love Jordan Mason, but since I'm going with the passing attack stack here, I'm going to avoid him in this build. So we'll drop down to Kenneth Walker, who I like a lot of $6,800. And then we'll probably need a value running back because I'm going to be spending up a tight end. We're assuming George Kittle didn't die in practice yet. If he does, obviously. We'll have to talk about that later. Well, you have to talk about that amongst yourself because this video is already going to be out. So we need a cheaper running back. We have Tyrone Tracy down there at $4,300. I don't feel like double stacking the running backs from the same game though. So let's just plug in Alexander Mattison here at $5,200, and then we'll move on to wide receivers. And always a long list here, but a lot of it's just due to pairing options with our quarterbacks. And if we have a lot of interesting quarterbacks this week, at least several of them, I mean, we're going to be just kind of stuck with a lot of wide receivers because we have to play 3 compared to 2 at the running back position. Then we can also play 1 in the flex spot. And there's always just a lot more viable wide receivers than there are running backs on any given slate. Like if we're playing Jordan Love, we're looking at guys like Jaden Reed, maybe in Wicks. Maybe we haven't got the tight end yet, but obviously Tucker Kraft is going to be viable. If we're playing Brock Purdy, he's probably not going to get there by himself on the ground. So Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, maybe one day he'll have a good game. Juwan Jennings, George Kittle. You're just mainly stacking with our quarterbacks here, so I'm not going to talk about every single wide receiver. But just to get some quick cash game thoughts out of the way first, if I am spending up like $6K plus, for me, Deebo Samuel and Jaden Reed would be my favorite options. I don't really see myself spending an absolute premium on wide receiver in cash games this week. Like, yes, I like Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, Marvin Harrison in tournaments as like a run back option with that San Francisco stack, which is what we have currently. I'm not sure if I'm going to force that. I don't really think they're going to be cash game plays, but I love Deebo Samuel at that price point. Love Jaden Reed. Those guys project extremely well for me and on offenses that I think are going to put up some points. If you are trying to save a little bit more money, we have to go down the pole here a little bit, but we have Deontay Johnson at $6,100. Price is up a little bit from last week, but no reason to believe the targets are going to go away anytime soon with Andy Dalton under center. Currently sporting a near 30% target share on the season, and with Andy Dalton specifically, that number is even a little bit better. Outside of that, Wan'Dale Robinson with no Malik Neighbors. Now, I don't think Wan'Dale Robinson is going to get all of the Malik Neighbor targets, which I believe he's got roughly a 40% target share on the season. But Robinson himself, he's averaging 9.5 targets per game and a 28% target share. It would not surprise me at all if we see a 30+% target share for Wan'Dale Robinson in this game. Now, he's not a big A-dot guy. He's not Malik Neighbors where he can make it just a big splash play. He's at 4.6 for his A-dot this year. But on a PPR site like DraftKings, I mean, those receptions rack up in a hurry. And then Jordan Whittington down here at $4,600, currently projecting him to be the highest on wide receiver on the slate. That could sway as the weekend progresses. I think we could end up maybe seeing Wan'Dale Robinson get up there with Malik, because Malik Neighbors news just dropped a little bit ago. So, I mean, I haven't had much time for ownership to kind of sit on it yet. But before that, I mean, Jordan Whittington was my highest projected wide receiver in terms of ownership. Great value play. We should see close to 8-ish targets in this game. They should be trailing versus the Green Bay Packers. High total here, so I don't think there's really any reason not to like Jordan Whittington. I know the Rams offense isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but $1 per dollar wise, he does project pretty well. All right, moving back to the build here, we got to get some wide receivers knocked out. Since I'm playing Brock Purdy, I mean, we have a couple of guys we could go with, but I really like Deebo Samuel this week. So plug him in at $6,800. Now after that, we're going to have to try to get some cheaper wide receivers because we only have $5,000 to play with. Now I realize if we plug in a cheap defense and a cheaper tight end, which I'm playing George Kittle, so I guess I can't say the cheap tight end route this week to save myself. So we'll probably have to save some money. Now, I really do like Wan'Dale Robinson at $5,600. I mean, there's some other guys I like too, but we'll plug them in and then we'll move on to tight end and see what we have to work with after that. All right, and tight ends, the most illustrious position of the 2024 season. I mean, how can you not love talking about these guys? For me personally, in most builds, I'd probably end up spending down. Tucker Kraft is currently my highest projected owned tight end of the week. He had 9 targets last weekend. You take Christian Watson out of the offense, just makes it less, or more condensed, I should say. And at $3,500 on a team that people are going to want to play, I mean, yeah, it makes sense that he'll be very chalky. Kobe Parkinson on the other side of the game is fine. $3,700. He's running routes 55% of the time, 4.8 targets per game. Like, yeah, it's decent at that price point. Zach Ertz. If you are playing Jaden Daniels, he would be a fine stacking option, but just as a standalone play, $1 per dollar wise, he's not too far off the other two behind him. There's no Khalil Shakur this week, which should be a bump for everybody in the Buffalo passing attack, Dalton Kincaid included, which we finally saw him get going last week, which was nice. Brock Bowers with no Devontae Adams. He's averaging 6 targets per game, running routes nearly 70% of the time. George Kittle, in my specific build, would make a lot of sense. I do not know if he's going to end up playing or not. He did miss practice on Thursday. We'll see if he ends up practicing on Friday. As of right now, I do not know this information, so I apologize if he ends up being out. And Trey McBride, he is going to return this week from the concussion. If we didn't go with George Kittle, he'd be a fine run back option. He's only $300 more. On FanDuel, really tough to fit in Kittle though at $7,000, but I think it's still feasible over there. It's not completely out of the question. But for me, Tucker Kraft's probably your cash game tight end. Outside of that, you're just picking and choosing. All right, so let's finish this build off. Like I said, don't know the status of George Kittle right now. If he happens to be out, obviously we can't play him. If he happens to be in with no limitations, yeah, I love him this week. So let's just pretend he's playing for this specific build. And now we have $4,600 left. The cool thing is we can play a cheap defense. And as I always tell you guys, I don't care which one, as long as it's not like one we're stacking against, or at least they don't have like a 30-point applied team total against them, which the Panthers have neither this week. So we'll plug them in here at $2,400. I mean, if you're really wanting like a cash defense, the Patriots, the Broncos, I mean, I'd say they make the most sense. But the Panthers down here, certainly a fine option if we are hurting for cash a little bit. And now we have nearly $6,000 for the last 2 spots, which honestly feels pretty good. We do not have any Packers currently, which I would like to get one at least. So if we wanted to play Jaden Reed here at $6,500, I would love that because I do want exposure to that game. And we would have enough money to fit in Jordan Whittington if we wanted to go that route. Now we have a little bit more money because I think he's 46, but I mean, don't act like you have to max out your salary. But there's several good options here. Keon Coleman, Jordan Whittington. I think for this build, I think Jordan Whittington would be my favorite. So honestly, that's not a bad build roster construction wise. Again, don't copy this. It's just, I think it makes sense. So we have Brock Purdy, double stack with Deebo Samuel and George Kittle since we don't have Jordan Mason. We're just assuming it's a nice passing attack, full-blown 3-touchdown, 4-touchdown Brock Purdy game. I'm not saying that's the outcome. I'm just saying for this build, that's what the theorization would be behind it. Playing Kenneth Walker and Alexander Madison, 2 solid running backs there. Madison just because of the injury to Zamir White. Wandale Robinson with no Malik Neighbors. Jaden Reed because I love that game, and no Christian Watson. And then Winnington, we're running it back, so you have like a little mini stack going on there without the quarterbacks. And the Panthers defense because it fit. Again, apply this to your own favorite plays. If you had Geno Smith, you could go with DK Metcalf. JSN, running back with the Wandale Robinson, that's a fine build as well. You take out Kenneth Walker since we're all in on the passing attack there, and you can make it work with your own favorite plays. And as I said in the beginning, I'm just going to run the optimizer here. A quick dry run to see what guys are popping up the most. We'll put some randomness on the projections. I did remove the ownership projections because, I'm not going to give everything away. I will do a quick position stack here. We're going to stack a quarterback with either a wide receiver, tight end, maybe both. Depends on whatever it wants to do from the same team. We're not going to force a run back, and we're also not going to make specifics for teams, but if you want to, you can do that on here. So we'll just run a quick 20 max, and it looks like we got out the run here. So let's see what players are populating the most. And again, these are not the exact projections because we did have some randomness, but you're going to see a lot of Wandale Robinson here. And these are not the finalized projections either. So again, things are going to change by Sunday, but probably not by much. A lot of Trey Tucker, Patriots, Jaden Reed, Winnington, Mason, Kyron. Love Kyron Williams this week. Love Mason. So that makes a lot of sense there. But yeah, pretty much all guys we have talked about. So there shouldn't be any surprises. If you look at our Brock Purdy lineups, we should have guys stacked with him. And if you look at the first one, yeah, George Kittle popped in. Looks like this one has Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. If you look at that Jordan Love lineup over here, if I can specify where he is. Yeah, right there. Jordan Love highlighted. Looks like we threw in Jaden Reed and nobody else with him. And we do have a run back with Jordan Winnington there, but we did not specify we need one. Not sure if Anthony Richardson's playing, but he did pop into a lineup here and it forced in Michael Pittman. But again, there's certain guys you're not forcing those in. If I took more time, I would play around with exposures. I would play around with my stack settings a lot more. I would remove like some quarterbacks from having to force a stack in. Some teams I would force in a run back option if I really like that game stack. But no surprise here. A lot of 49ers, a lot of Giants. I'm assuming Tracy, Wandale Robinson. Most of that, maybe some Darius Slayton. But yeah, not a ton of surprises here, so it looks like our thought process is in line with some projections this week, and I feel like a lot of people will feel the same play on most of these players. But with that being said, that's all I got for this week's video, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, or even if you didn't, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you know where to leave them down below. More than happy to look at them. We wish you all the best, and I'll see you all next time.